Okay, so now we're going to move on today to talk about the environment and environmental philosophy. And I think I've mentioned this in class, but my master's work was actually in environmental philosophy. It is a subject that I'm very passionate about. It's a subject that I wish, again, we had more time for and that we kind of had the classroom to be able to kind of dive into. Um, and I mean, this starts, again, kind of with the same questions that I asked about animal ethics, which is, thinking about, do we have a duty to the environment, right? Do we have a duty to act certain ways with our consumption patterns, with kind of what we do, how we treat non-human animals, which was the subject for Monday. But yeah, do we have a responsibility to the environment? And if so, what is that responsibility? What are those responsibilities? And when we think about this, like there's some really interesting philosophical questions here. And one of my favorites is, and you hear politicians appeal to this all of the time on all sides of the aisle, where, you hear the phrase, future generations. Yeah, we need to make the world a better place for future generations, right? And we can obviously have a conversation of a lot of environmental degradations that are currently happening when you think about global warming and climate change. And again, I know that many people have many differing and varying thoughts on global warming and climate change. I'm not totally interested in kind of going down that wormhole. But I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of kind of discussions um, that draw a lot of people in about and concerning the environment. And oftentimes, you hear politicians, say something about future generations and saying, that we need to leave the world better for future generations. Okay, and it's this appeal. Now, I think a lot of us hear that and we say, yeah, I agree. But let me pose something to you for a second, right? Future generations don't exist right now, right? Your children don't exist. I mean, maybe you do have children, but I'm just going to venture to say that probably most of you do not have children. And your children probably don't have children. And so this appeal to future generations is really interesting for the fact that future generations are unknown. And so, why would it be the case that I should care at all why should I care at all about a generation that doesn't exist? Shouldn't I care about this generation, the people that I'm around, my own family at this time, my own kind of desires and ends, and who cares, right? Apparently people back 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they didn't care about us right now, so why do I have any obligation, right? That's a hard question to answer. And I mean, a lot of environmental philosophers and a lot of environmental theorists and environmental ethicists have various replies. And I'm sure that many of you would still say, yeah, no, we still have a duty to future generations. But what is it, right? And especially, how do we change our behavior when it seems as if a lot of kind of um, a lot of decisions right now can't really be reverted. Okay? And then moreover, when we think about kind of environmental discussions, I mean, one of the greatest kind of debates in environmental philosophy and policy making, decision making, is again kind of the tension that exists between environmental preservation and human beings' livelihood, their ability to make money. And a lot of people make money off of utilizing, um, exploiting the environment for natural resources, whether that's oil, whether that's timber, right? Whatever the case may be. And so these questions of environmental philosophy are serious, and they are undoubtedly kind of um, directly directly practical to all of our lives, right? And I'm sure that many of you, when you think of like environmental philosophy, you're like, oh, just a bunch of tree huggers out there just hugging trees and saying we all have to get along and blah blah blah. And sure, yeah, there's going to be a couple people like that. But ultimately, environmental philosophers and environmental ethicists want to be able to contribute productively to conversations that deal with environmental use, that deal with environmental decision making. And again, this goes back to some of our discussions from Monday where, in a lot of various worldviews, there's the thought that, human beings are the pinnacle of creation, the pinnacle of evolution. Therefore, we can do whatever we damn well please with the environment. And, we have to be good stewards of it, but still we can use what we want. We can take what we need and we can get out of here, right? When I say get out of here, it means that we can live our life how we want to live it. It doesn't really matter. And so how do we break that view, right? How do we break this kind of very entrenched view of using the land for our own use, right? And should we? I mean, maybe that's fine, right? There's definitely avenues and there's definitely perspectives of saying we should use the environment however we want because, again, we're here. Let's live. We need to secure our own ends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're going to kind of dive into some of these questions today. And we're going to do so by looking at one of, frankly, and I'll show my hand here a little bit, but we're going to be looking at one of my favorite thinkers, and he was a pioneer back in the 30s and 40s, and it was a guy named Aldo Leopold. And so we're going to kind of investigate his land ethic, which you can find on page 445 of your book.